working on Interior Department spending for the next budget year, and also a measure to extend the term of FBI Director Robert Mueller. You can see live House coverage on C-SPAN and live Senate coverage right here on C-SPAN 2.
And Detective John M. Gibson, we pray in your merciful name. Amen.
Thank you, Chaplain. Please join me in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The clerk will read a communication to the Senate.
Washington, D.C., July 25, 2011. To the Senate. On the provisions of Rule 1, Paragraph 3 of the Standing Rules of the Senate, I hereby appoint the Honorable Christopher A. Coons, a senator from the state of Maryland, to perform the duties of the state of Delaware, to perform the duties of the chair. Signed, Daniel K. Inouye, President Pro Tempore.
Mr. President.
The Majority Leader.
Following leader remarks, the Senate will be in a period of morning business until 4:30 this afternoon. At 3:40, the Senate will conduct a moment of silence in memory of Officer John J. Chestnut, Detective John M. Gibson, the United States Capitol Police, who were killed 13 years ago defending this Capitol against a crazed intruder. At 4:30 p.m., the Senate will be in executive session considering the nomination of Paul Engelmayer, the United States District Judge for the Southern District of New York, and Ramona Manglona to be a District Judge for the Northern Mariana Islands. At 5:30 p.m., there will be a roll call vote on confirmation of Engelmayer nomination. The Mangola nomination expected to be confirmed by voice vote. Additional roll call votes are possible this evening. Mr. President, every day people from across this great nation around the globe come here to visit the Capitol, to see the seat of American democracy. Every day, those of us who are fortunate to have been elected by our home states to serve in Congress also come here to represent this nation and the American people in that democracy. And every day, a brave and dedicated group of men and women come here to serve as Capitol Police officers, to ensure that whether we're here to work or to visit, we're safe from harm. In 1998, two of those dedicated police officers gave their lives protecting this Capitol and the people that are in this Capitol. They were Special Agent John Gibson and Officer Jacob Chestnut. 13 years ago yesterday, a man entered the House side of the Capitol building with a gun and shot Officer Chestnut at point-blank range. Agent Gibson warned tourists and staff to take cover and then confronted the gun run. And though Agent Gibson was also shot, to prevent anyone else from being killed. Both officers died that day. They served a combined 36 years on the force, protecting their fellow men and women. When I first came to Washington, I worked the night shift, the swing shift as a Capitol Police officer. That's why, Mr. President, I feel a particular closeness to the Capitol Police. When I worked, I was never in danger. I was never called upon to put my life on the line. I only hope I would have shown the bravery that Agent Gibson and Officer Chestnut displayed that afternoon they were killed. I was a member of the Senate when Agent Gibson and Officer Chestnut gave their lives to save the lives of others. I know nothing can make up for the loss of a cherished loved one. I hope their families and friends take some comfort knowing those of us who were here that day hold them in our memories and in our hearts. And while I know it's little solace to their families, the tragedy of that day made the Capitol a safer place. It led to the construction of the Capitol Visitor Center, which prevents a madman like the one who shot Agent Gibson and Officer Chestnut from entering the Capitol. We're all grateful for their sacrifice, and we're grateful that every day devoted men and women like them guard these hallowed halls. Mr. President, some of those dedicated police officers stood guard Saturday and Sunday as we worked to reach an agreement to avert a default on our national debt. Leaders from both parties were here throughout the weekend. Differences still separate our two sides, but work toward an agreement continues. This afternoon I'll put on the floor a proposal that I hope will break that impasse. This legislation would put to rest the specter of default. It would cut $2.7 trillion from the deficit over the next decade. It would not raise any new revenue or make any cuts to Medicare, Medicaid, or Social Security. All the cuts included in this package have previously been supported by Republicans. The proposal provides everything the House Republicans have said they needed from an agreement to avert default and cut the deficit. I hope my colleagues on the other side will still know a good deal when they see it. I hope they'll remember how to say yes. The Tea Party-led House of Representatives has held up a resolution of these negotiations for weeks because they didn't want oil companies, corporations, ship jobs overseas, or millionaires and billionaires in their corporate jets to pay their fair share. If they now oppose an agreement that meets every one of their demands, it will be because they have put politics first and the good of this nation and economy last. I hope they will not continue to insist on the kind of short-term fix they opposed a few short weeks ago. And they know Democrats in the Senate will not pass and President Obama will not sign. Economists have already said a short-term solution is no solution at all. It will not give the markets the certainty they need. And the credit rating agencies have said a short-term Band-Aid could have many of the same effects as default: a downgrade of U.S. debt, soaring interest rates, and an effective tax increase for every American family and business. The financial markets don't trust the right-wing Tea Party-led House of Representatives. They don't believe that they should hold this process hostage, and they don't want them to do it again in 6 months. Or to make the right decision, we need to make the right decision now, and we need to do it because the economy is on the line. This is what market analysts said about a plan to avert default for only a few months, and I quote, "From the market's point of view, a two-stage plan is a non-starter because we now know it's an amateur hour on Capitol Hill, and we don't want to be painted in the corner again." Markets need certainty, Mr. President. Americans need certainty. The world needs certainty. And an agreement that provides that certainty is within our grasp. Democrats have done more than Republicans. I'm sorry, Mr. President. Democrats have done more than just meet Republicans in the middle. We've met them all the way. Now we'll see whether Republicans are against any agreement at all, or whether they remember how to say yes when the compromise on the table gives them everything they've demanded.
Clerk will call the roll.
Kaka. Mr. Alexander.
Mr. President, I suggest that further proceedings on the quorum call be dispensed with.
Without objection.
As visitors walk through the Capitol for the first time, they eventually come across a plaque near one of the entrances on the east front that memorializes an event which took place 13 years ago yesterday. It was 13 years ago that officers Jacob Joseph Chestnut and Detective John Michael Gibson made the ultimate sacrifice to protect all who were working and visiting the Capitol on that Friday afternoon. And every year at this time, we take a moment to step back from our work, put aside our differences, and remember these good men whose sacrifice stands as a permanent reminder of the debt we owe them and to all those who continue to put themselves on the front line every day to defend the rest of us, from the Capitol Police Force to local law enforcement officials to those serving overseas. America has always been blessed to have men and women rise up in every generation who are willing to put their nation ahead of their lives. Today we honor two in particular who did so in this very building. Officer Chestnut was a 20-year veteran of the Air Force, a loving husband and a father of 5. Detective Gibson had served 3 years on Congressman Tom DeLay's protective detail. Both had served 18 years on the Capitol Police Force. A friend of Detective Gibson's recalled shortly after the shooting that just a few days before, John told him he'd never had to draw his weapon on the job. Yet despite being mortally wounded on the day he died, John did not hesitate to return fire, wounding the intruder. Calling upon his instincts and his training, Detective Gibson's actions saved many lives that day. Officer Chestnut and Detective Gibson exemplify the best America has to offer, and that's why we honor them here today. My friend, the Majority Leader, is actually a former Capitol Police officer himself. He understands more than anyone in this chamber the honor and dedication as well as the risk associated with the job. I know he joins me in honoring Jacob Joseph Chestnut and John Michael Gibson, as well as all Capitol Police who put their lives on the line every day to protect us and this institution. To all members of the Capitol Police Force, thank you for your service and for your professionalism. Your duties do not go unnoticed. And on this day that we remember Officer Chestnut and Detective Gibson, I'd also like to take a moment to remember the families of these good men who've been so deeply affected by this tragedy. Our prayers continue to go out to them. May God continue to protect them as their loved ones protected us. Now, Mr. President, on a different subject, I'd like to say a few words about the ongoing debt ceiling discussions. I think the American people can be excused for being a little confused at this point as to what's going on here in Washington, and a little bit frustrated, and frankly, I am as well. There's no reason in the world that the American people should have had to wake up this morning unsure of whether Washington was going to resolve this problem. Candidly, as of Saturday afternoon, I had no doubt that a solution was at hand. After the President's performance in his press conference on Friday, leaders from both parties and both houses got together and decided we needed to come up with a way forward on our own. And that's just what we did. We came together in good faith and decided to do the right thing. Everyone agreed that default wasn't an option, so we put together a responsible proposal that prevented default while reducing Washington's spending. Republicans, and yes, some Democrats, have been clear for months that tax hikes couldn't be a part of the package. We've also been clear that serious cuts would have to be part of any package. So taking all of this into consideration, the responsible path forward was clear to everyone, a plan that avoided default and required additional savings before any further increase in the debt ceiling. Leaders from both parties in both houses agreed that this was the right path forward legislatively. The only thing to do at that point was to present this bipartisan solution to the President. And what was the President's response? Well, unfortunately, to demand the largest single debt limit increase in history, $500 billion more than the previous biggest increase Democrats approved 2 years ago when they controlled both Congress and the White House. And this was the President's justification as he put it on Friday. Quote, "The only bottom line I have is that we have to extend the debt ceiling through the next election." Through the next election into 2013. That's a direct quote from the President of the United States. Now, there's absolutely no economic justification for insisting on a debt limit increase that brings us through the next election. It's not the beginning of a fiscal year. It's not the beginning of a calendar year. Based on his own words, it's hard to conclude that this request has anything to do with anything other than the President's reelection. Look, Congress has raised the federal debt limit 62 times since 1972. The average length of an increase over that period is just over 7 months. But now the President says it has to be nearly 2 years. Why? So he can continue to spend as he pleases. This weekend, we offered the President a bipartisan proposal to avoid default so we could have the time we need to put together a serious plan for getting our house in order, and he rejected it out of hand. Not for economic reasons, understand, but as he put it, quote, "to extend this debt ceiling through the next election," end quote. Time is running out, Mr. President, and with all due respect to the President, we have more important things to worry about than getting through the next election. A bipartisan plan to resolve this crisis was literally within our reach this weekend. The President has to know that this approach is a responsible path forward. We ought to put it back on the table. Congressional leaders of both parties have shown they are willing to work in good faith. I would suggest that the President reconsider their offer rather than veto the country into default. Mr. President, I yield the floor.
Under the previous order, the leadership time is reserved, and under the previous order, the Senate will be in a period of morning business until 4:30 p.m., with senators permitted to speak therein for up to 10 minutes each.
Mr. President.
The senator from Minnesota.
Mr. President, I rise today to share my deepest sympathies for the people of Norway, who, as my colleagues know, experienced a despicable terrorist act this past Friday, July 22nd. In the Senate, I represent the state of Minnesota, and it is a state that has the largest number of people of Norwegian heritage outside of the country of Norway. The influence of Norwegian culture can be found throughout our state, and the bonds between Norway and Minnesota continue to be incredibly strong to this day. That is why the shock of Friday's violence hit us so close to home. This past weekend, I joined Minnesotans and the whole world in offering our country's prayers and sympathy to the people of Norway. I attended the memorial service at the Norwegian Lutheran Memorial Church in Minneapolis, where hundreds of people of Norwegian heritage gathered together to mourn the loss. It's especially heartbreaking that a mass murder like this would take place in a country like Norway. The world knows Norway as a country that is both peaceful and peace-seeking. After all, Norway is home to the Nobel Peace Prize, and it has offered safe haven to refugees and the politically persecuted from all around the world. It just doesn't make sense. I'm a parent. My daughter is the same age as many of the young people that were at that camp, and she was there with our family at the memorial service Sunday. These kids at this camp were idealistic kids. They were teenagers. They were at that camp because of their interest in their community and in democracy. It is very hard and very painful even to think about such a cold-blooded attack and the massacre of so many innocent children. It is the kind of terrible tragedy that puts all of us to a test. It tests our resilience, our trust, and our faith. On Saturday morning, I spoke with Ambassador Stroman, Norway's ambassador to the United States. I conveyed the deepest sympathies of the people of our state. He assured me that even though this is a very difficult time, that Norway is strong, the Norwegian people are strong, and that they will make it through this time of sorrow. And we will stand by them. but we will also stand up against the hate that inspired this action. We are starting to get a sense over the last 2 days of what motivated this madman. And we know now that while most of the people attacked were native Norwegians, there were also people from other countries, immigrants to Norway, new citizens to Norway. And we all need to remember, and I say this as a state that was settled originally by Norwegians and Swedes and Danes and Germans, but we also remember that from then on there were other waves of immigrants that came to my state and all over the country, including Slovenians, those are my relatives, as well as people from Poland and Russia, and most recently in Minnesota, the Hmong people have a major presence in our state, as well as people from Somalia. And what has made our state, we remember, and our country, and countries like Norway, such vibrant places for democracy, is that openness, it's that freedom, it's that tolerance. And I reminded my friends at the Norwegian church on Sunday morning of something that President Clinton actually said after the Oklahoma City bombing when he spoke at that memorial service. And he said this: "Let us let our own children know that we will stand against the forces of fear. When there is talk of hatred, let us stand up and talk against it. When there is talk of violence, let us stand up and talk against it." And I call on my colleagues today to stand true to those words, and we will all continue to confront the forces of fear and hatred with that same spirit of faith, of tolerance, and goodwill. So let us continue to stand strong in support of our allies and friends in Norway today. Our thoughts and prayers are with them. Thank you, Mr. President, and I yield the floor.
The Senator from Arizona.
Thank you, Mr. President. Let me associate myself with the remarks of the Senator from Minnesota. My wife and I traveled to Oslo, Norway, just a few years ago, and were deeply touched by the hospitality of the people there and the peacefulness of the country, and it just is almost too much to bear to think about what they've gone through as a result of this recent tragedy. I appreciate her remarks. And also both the majority and minority leader talked earlier about the sacrifice of two of our Capitol Police officers who died in the line of duty protecting people here at the United States Capitol, and our remembrance of them on this day. Chaplain also prayed that we remember their sacrifice. And I think it's important for us to pause in circumstances like this, especially when we're involved in such a deeply divided discussion about the issues of the day that confront us. I also thought it interesting that regarding the issues that we are debating that so deeply divide us, a Wall Street Journal op-ed today appeared, which is one of those rare times when the author puts into a much larger perspective, a more cosmic perspective, what we're really talking about here, and puts it in moral terms, in long-term moral terms, rather than just Democrats versus Republicans and the fight of the day. And so, Mr. President, I'll ask unanimous consent at this point to insert after my remarks the op-ed in the Wall Street Journal today by Arthur Brooks called "The Debt Ceiling and the Pursuit of Happiness."
Without objection.
Thank you. Arthur Brooks is the head of AEI, the American Enterprise Institute, and has written frequently on the subject of happiness in our country and how we get there. His most recent book is called "The Battle: How the Fight Between Free Enterprise and Big Government Will Shape America's Future." And his theme in this op-ed was similar to the theme in the book, which is that we have the system we have because Americans have found that it is the system which most leads us to the pursuit of happiness, to the achievement of success, and things that are really important in our lives. And so he talks about the fight that we're engaged in now about extending the debt ceiling as being a fight against 50-year trends towards stateism, which he identifies as a state which would be very disappointing to Americans, where we would not have the ability to pursue our dreams, the same opportunity that we have today to be successful if we take risks and to really utilize the full potential of the free market system. He says, consider a few facts, and this is just the one thing I'll quote from his article. He said, the Bureau of Economic Analysis tells us that total government spending at all levels has risen to 37% of the gross domestic product today from 27% in 1960, and it's set to reach 50% by 2038. The Tax Foundation reports that between 1986 and 2008, The share of federal income taxes paid by the top 5% of earners has risen to 59% from 43%. Between 1986 and 2009, the percentage of Americans who pay zero or negative federal income taxes has increased to 51% from 18.5%. And all this is accompanied by an increase in our national debt to 100% of gross domestic product today from 42% in 1980. All of these obviously portend a trend toward statism, toward the funding of the state through increased taxation by fewer and fewer people, but at greater and greater amounts of money. And in his view and in mine, will ultimately reduce the kinds of incentives that the free market system provides for Americans to be able to earn, to hire others, to assist our economy to grow, and in the process to increase our standard of living. This is one of the reasons why Republicans have been so focused on reducing spending as the solution to the problem that we face here in Washington today. Our problem is not that we don't tax Americans enough. Our problem is we spend too much here in Washington. And that's manifested by the statistic that now we're spending almost 25% of the gross domestic product. We were up to 25, and we're headed back up there. And yet, just 3 short years ago, we were at the level of average in our country, spending about 20% of the gross domestic product. So spending has skyrocketed just in the last 3 years. If a physician is wanting to treat a patient's condition, the physician diagnoses the patient for what's wrong and then treats that illness. What's wrong with us today is that Washington's spending is out of control. That's the diagnosis. So what's the treatment? The treatment is not to pile on more taxes onto an already sick economy. The treatment is to reduce the amount of government spending. And that's what Republicans have urged us to do. And the American people, fortunately, I think are in the same place. Let me just cite 3 surveys that make the point. One of them is a Rasmussen survey just reported July 22nd of likely voters in the country. And it asks the question of the voters, would you fear that the debt deal would raise taxes too much or too little? And would you fear that the debt deal will cut spending too little or will cut spending too much? And the answer was very interesting. Among likely voters, the answer is this. 62% of voters believe that the deal will raise taxes too much. Only 26% think we will raise taxes too little. And on the spending side, 56% are afraid that it will cut spending too little. And only 25% think that it'll cut spending too much. So you can see the American people are with us here. They understand our problem is spending, not taxes. And they're worried that we're not going to reduce spending enough and that, in fact, we're going to increase taxes too much. Rasmussen had another survey a week before of likely voters, and the question was, do you favor including a tax hike in the deal? And this was interesting. 55% of voters said no, and only 34% of likely voters said yes. So the majority, by far, are saying don't include a tax hike in the deal. Again, they understand what the problem is. It's not taxes, it's spending. CNN had a poll just a few days before that, and the question there were several questions in this poll, but the one that struck my eye was the one that asked about raising the debt ceiling only if we also cut spending, cap it at certain levels, and pass a balanced budget amendment. That's the so-called cut, cap, and balance proposal that passed the House of Representatives but was tabled by our Democratic colleagues here in the Senate last week. And CNN reports by a 2-to-1 margin, the American people thought we should cut, cap, and balance. 66% favored, only 33% opposed. So it's interesting to me that the American people have internalized the same thing that probably the reason Republicans are expressing this is because we've been listening to our constituents who've been telling us this. Our concern is not that we should raise taxes. Our concern is that we should cut spending, and that's why we've been saying what we've been saying here. And I find it interesting that even the President himself, in an earlier time, shared the same sentiment in August of 2009. Then he made a similar point in December of last year when the tax rates that have been in existence for a decade were extended for another 2 years. He said, you don't raise taxes in a recession. And he's exactly right. That was at a time, by the way, when growth in the quarter that he said that was at just about 6% of GDP. Today, growth is less than 2% of GDP. So our economic situation has gotten worse since then. We're up to 9.2% unemployment. Obviously, you don't raise taxes in a recession. When you've got a bad economic condition, the worst medicine is to raise taxes. And another point that Republicans have been trying to make with regard to this difference between raising taxes or reducing spending is that usually what happens is that when Congress sets out to do this, a couple of things happen. You get the permanent increases in spending, but you never get the reductions, the permanent increases in taxes, but you never get the same a dollar for dollar or $2 or $3 for one that you'd been promised in reductions in spending. Moreover, when you aim at hitting the millionaires and billionaires, which is usually the excuse for raising taxes, you end up hitting a lot of other folks. And one of the things that we're concerned about is that, as happened with the alternative minimum tax, when we tried to make sure that 128 specific millionaires didn't get out of paying taxes because of the deductions and credits that they could take, we put into effect the alternative minimum tax. And you know how many people that hits today? 25 million Americans are hit by the alternative minimum tax. You aim at the millionaires, you hit everybody else. And in fact, that's exactly what would happen under the proposal of the President today. He says we need to hit the millionaires and billionaires. Well, there are 319,000 American households that report incomes of over $1 million a year. But there are 3.6 million other households that would be affected in the same way by the President's tax increase, because they are also in the top two income tax brackets. So when you raise the top two brackets, you're not just going to hit the millionaires and billionaires, you're also going to hit a lot of other Americans that don't report incomes of over $1 million a year. Probably the primary reason, though, that we have argued that you should not be raising taxes in this bad economic time is that it's a job killer. And this is illustrated by many, many things, one of which is the President's own Small Business Administration. One of the taxes that the President has proposed hiking would hit small businesses especially hard. And according to the Office of Advocacy of the Obama Small Business Administration, this tax, and I'm quoting now, could ultimately force many small businesses to close, end of quote. Now, why would you impose a tax on small businesses that could ultimately force many of them to close? It's the wrong medicine for a sick economy. And so, in addition to the fact that you always end up hitting a lot more than the millionaires and billionaires, and that the taxes are forever, but the savings never quite seem to materialize, the most important point here is that raising taxes is a job killer. Two-thirds of all of the jobs coming out of a recession are in the small business sector. 54% of all jobs in the country are small business created jobs. So, Mr. President, we're going to continue to push for reductions in spending as the way forward here. And I hope that during this next week we'll be able to get together with our House colleagues, and Republicans and Democrats alike will be able to at least rally around one thing that we can all agree on: spending has to be reduced. And if later on we need to have discussion about tax reform, that's a debate that I think all of us would like to have. Our tax code needs reforming. But let's do that not in the context of raising revenues, but rather in the context of making it a tax code that would enable us to grow more. And at the end of the day, that's what we should all be for, because a growing pie means there's more available for everyone, rich and poor alike, the families of America as well as the governments. So I hope that my colleagues will focus on what the American people are telling us through these surveys. Let's reduce spending, not increase taxes. Mr. President, I note the absence of a quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka.